Hello and welcome to WNHH Radio's Dateline New Haven. I'm your host, Paul Bass, inviting you to look behind the headlines on the stories that make the Elm City tick. Mayor Toni Harp keeps making New Haven tick morning and night. She's here in the WNHH studio for her weekly Mayor Monday checkup on what she and we are up to in the Elm City. Good morning, Mayor Harp. Nice to see you.
Good morning. How you doing, Paul?
It's a little gloomy out. I don't mind it. It's a little atmospheric, but, you know.
Smells like snow.
Yes, it smells like snow. That's a good way to put it. It smells like snow. If you have a question for the mayor, snow or otherwise, feel free to pop it to us via Facebook Live. Or if you're Bob, feel free to call. Otherwise, go to the New Haven Independent Facebook page. You'll see the video right there. And thanks to Gateway Community College and Bertram Moses PC for providing financial support for today's program. So I got a burning question for you, Mayor Harp.
What's that?
Did you return to New Haven this weekend with a big hole in your pocket, or were you flush with cash?
Because of the gaming symposium.
That's right. I heard you were at a gaming
symposium. I'll tell you what, they had the biggest bagels with cream cheese that I've ever seen.
Were they good bagels?
They were good, but they were huge.
Like everything bagels, plain bagels, pumpernickel?
They were plain bagels with this very thick cream cheese, and they were, like 2 fistful in one.
We call that schmear. What kind of schmear? Was it like lox mixed in, or was it just plain cream cheese?
It was just plain cream cheese.
Did you have any?
You're not a
carb thing. Oh, you had it.
I know, because it kept calling me.
It's amazing to me how many calories are in a bagel.
I know, it's a lot.
Just like things, just some dough. You put some water, and it's got like 1,000,000 calories in it.
I know.
But I like bagels.
I mean, it was very, very good. But yeah.
So that you didn't have a hole in your pocket, you just had a full belly.
Yeah, I had it. Yeah. Yeah, there was a hole in the bagel, although it was stuffed with cream cheese.
And you had the whole bagel?
Well, yeah, on the way home, It was lunch.
So you were at a game. What was the gaming symposium? This is about electronic gambling that's now legalized everywhere?
No, I think it was about really determining whether or not pretty much the people of Bridgeport were aware of the proposal for a gaming resort at Still Point.
Oh, still in Bridgeport? That's still alive?
Well, they think so, yeah.
And that's the MGM Resorts?
No, they have a whole nother group. I think MGM is a part of it, but...
Sorry, I'm out of touch on this. So, Bridgeport's like foreign policy for us.
And, yeah, I mean, it's pretty much the same proposal that there was last year, that there would be a resort there, that there would be a casino and a number of eating venues, as well as at least one hotel, maybe a couple, and then of course the training facility would be in New Haven, and that's
right. So I'm completely out of date on this one, and some of our listeners might be too. Last year, when you and I talked about it on the show, there needed to be a state bill passed to allow it that would undo a deal with one of the Native American tribes because they might have another casino. And then what was in it for us was that there was a guarantee of a training facility, as you just mentioned, based in New Haven with a lot of jobs that would then be created in Bridgeport. So what's the status of that? Is that still a bill that would require?
I think that there is still there's a need for the General Assembly to pass some sort of bill to allow that to happen. I think that there was a bill that sort of studied all of that last year that was passed.
Yeah, that death knell word, study.
But it didn't get passed in the Senate. So whatever had to have been done still has to be done, and it has to pass both houses and get the governor to sign.
But you'd like to see it happen.
Well, I think it would be great for jobs for New Haven residents.
I know you said the word resort first.
Yeah.
During the governor campaign, Ned Lamont said, if we're going to do this, let's talk about this as a resort rather than a casino. Let's lead with all the tourism dollars.
Right. So I think that is there's still an interest in that. It's a beautiful site. I don't know if you've been there, but it's right on the Long Island Sound, and it's very underutilized, and so I think it would be a great place for a resort.
And Bridgeport, you don't have to fly there, right? You can drive.
You can drive.
Kind of far.
It's
from
like
my
maybe 20 minutes from here.
Also, this weekend, back closer to home, Mayor Harp, I'm told that you were at a fundraiser for the Barack Obama Barnard Bridge.
Yes.
What's that?
Well, I don't know if there are at least 12,000 people who drive on the boulevard every day, and which was surprising to me. So Jerry Poole pointed that out when.
I thought it'd be more.
Well, yeah, but he said 12,000.
Okay, that's a good number.
It's a good number. And so the people in that ward, Ward 23, have wanted to have that bridge because it's seen by so many travelers every day.
You mean the pedestrian bridge? When they rebuilt the school, they connected it to the park.
To the parks, yeah, to the park.
It's hard to cross that street if you're a human.
It's almost impossible, and so you can take, and the students have a number of classes out there because you're right on the river.
Yeah, it's
and
cool.
Can see all these different beautiful birds and fish and
the Parks Department sometimes takes you on canoes, and you really feel like you're up in the mountains or something, somewhere. Yeah, you really.
And so they wanted to make sure it's right across the street from the school, so they wanted to make sure that the students had access to it. So there is the pedestrian bridge there. They want to have it named the Barack Obama.
Why do they need money for that? Isn't the bridge already built?
It's for the sign.
Oh, for the sign. How much money does it cost for a sign?
I asked Jerry how much they thought it would cost. He thinks it'll cost about $15,000
for a sign. I guess it's gonna be a good sign.
It's gonna be a nice sign.
Okay.
Yeah, I didn't see a mock-up, so I don't exactly know what it's gonna look
Actually,
like.
I think we published a mock-up. I forget. But now they don't open it much to neighborhood because they're worried about crime, right?
Right.
So are they ever gonna open that up so people can cross? You think, or you think it's too much of a security concern?
I don't know. I haven't. I don't know if there's a way to actually get onto the bridge unless you go through the school. Yeah. And I think that's the real issue.
Gotcha. All right. And the issue we're talking about is Mayor Monday here at WNHH 103.5 FM live stream at newhavenpin.org. Hey, you been to the theater lately?
I haven't, but I understand there's a wonderful play about New Haven there.
It's so interesting. It is so interesting.
Seen it.
Went to the Yale Rep, and it's about the step. Good thing you weren't mayor then, because this was a tough one. This was Ritchie versus DeStefano, that great landmark Supreme Court case about we say affirmative action. People who think it wasn't about affirmative action and prevailed say it's about a different way of looking at Title VII of the Civil Rights Act. But that changed the country. What rules you and other officials are allowed to use when you throw out a test, a professional test based on results. And the playwright spent 4 years talking to people in New Haven across the color divide to try to see what this meant and what the relationships are like. And it was very interesting. For me, it was interesting because I went twice. The first time I was too hung up on how these weren't like the people I know, Mike Briscoe and Frank Ritchie, beginning with Frank has hair and he doesn't speak in a Brooklyn accent, down to the whole play. They talked about New Haven rather than New Haven, which is that snotty Yaley put down thing because they even say in it. I had to get back to New Haven. Boy, I wonder if anyone's ever said that before. But on the other hand, they spent a lot of, I know. I felt the same way both times. But I really liked it the second time because when you stop worrying about if they're exactly the characters, there were some pretty raw conversations about race that were very interesting. And if you look at the reviews, the Hartford Courant, the Independent, the New Haven Arts paper, they have 3 different takes. The Independent reviewer, Brian Slattery, said it was really good because it showed how hard it is to talk about race and really tried. The Current reviewer, Christopher Arnott, said it was terrible because it got New Haven so wrong and the playwright as a main character just doesn't work. And Lucy Gelman, the art paper, said it was both really good and really bad. It really missed some of the nuances of this case in important ways and didn't always work as a play, but other times it really tackled something that wasn't. Did you think you'll go see it?
I'd like to go see it. Actually, the chief, fire chief.
I saw him there.
He invited me to go, so I'm going to have to take him up on it.
Oh, he's going to go again.
Yeah, I think well, if he takes me, I guess so. But
he was there with Andy Wolf. I saw him there in the crowd with Andy Wolf. And your name is in it because he talked about how you made Michael Briscoe the 911 operator.
Okay, yeah.
But I think the best part of the play, I'm sorry, is your predecessor, Mayor John DeStefano. He is on for 10 seconds. He comes on and says 3 words and bounds back.
It's really John?
No. Someone pretending to be John. Actually, it's the character. It's the character who plays Frank.
Okay.
The character who plays Frank Ritchie also plays John. And I think, I covered John for 26 years. Probably wrote maybe 100,000 words on him. I think these 3 words capture John DeStefano better than all those articles.
What were those 3 words?
See, I'm wondering, doesn't that give it away? Because if you're going to go, don't you want to be surprised?
No, I want to see. I will weigh and measure whether or not I agree with you.
Yeah, that's what I mean. But I think if I tell you in advance, then you're not surprised. I think I'd like you to be surprised.
Okay, so all right. Well, if I get to go,
And if not, I will. If you're not going, I'll definitely tell you.
Okay.
I also don't want to tell my listeners because I think because when you get like a punchline, if someone
So
tells you
they're
a punchline
all going to have to go now.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of interesting that we're talking about it. And Victor Bolden has an interesting character, and that's the other thing that's going to be hard for you. I think it was hard for me going there, is we know these people,
Right.
and it's not the playwright's fault. So there's Victor Bolden as a short part talking about his role, and he says, like why she asks him, why after they won the white firefighters and one Latino officer prevailed and they had to be promoted under this test. But then, as it turned out, one of the great ironies is that a lot of African Americans were promoted under the test too, right now kind of running the department. But why did you give the back lost pay only to the firefighters, only the white firefighters and Latino, and you didn't give any of the promoted black firefighters their back pay? And Victor Bolden, the city corporation counsel, is African American, and he said, we didn't have any money in the city, and we had to get this thing settled and done because we lost. And so they sued, so they got the money.
Okay.
Which is very interesting.
Very interesting.
But I thought was more, again, if we see it more context from here, not mentioned was the fact that Victor Bolden, before come the city, was the head of the NAACP Legal Defense Fund. So that kind of is an irony that showed how someone who philosophically disagreed with them was still able to do business with them. And furthermore, that it was a white corporation counsel that had the dispute and it was unable to be solved and went to court. Then he was gone, and then when it was settled and the city lost the Supreme Court, it was an African-American pro-affirmative action corporation counsel that was able to deal so effectively with the plaintiffs and settle a matter without any further fighting.
Yeah, he's a great guy.
I just thought that was deep. So that was why you see this different level. So I am. So if you come back, will you be our reviewer?
Yeah, sure, I will.
Okay, let me see. I just saw Bob. Would call Bob. Are you on? Bob? All right, so Bob's gonna have to call back. Sorry about that. So Mayor Harp, you haven't been to the theater, but we went to a lot of the places. You also went to a lot of ribbon cuttings. You went to Westville twice in the last week.
Yeah.
You went to a new
The Well.
Well
Went to the
for
Well.
Women. That's Julie Robbins. She started a massage place on a little storefront on West Elm, and it was so popular. You have to book months in advance. No new clients. She went into a whole fitness center, wellness center now on those Blake Street former factory offices where there's also a Montessori school down by the park. And so what was that all about?
It was really, well, we were cutting the ribbon for her new place. It's beautiful. They're going to do yoga there. And, she
Pilates.
Pilates. She focuses on pregnant women, prenatal as well as postnatal. And then, and it's mostly for women. And, she didn't really talk about it, but it's called, like the Well. And if you think about, particularly in, from my culture and African culture, the well is really important because, they don't have pipes and running water, and it's a meeting place. It's a place of sustenance. And I'm sure that in many respects, that's what she hopes this will be. It's the architecture is just absolutely beautiful.
Wow.
It's a lovely place.
All right. So I want to talk a little more about that, but first, Bob, you're on with Mayor Harp. How you doing?
All right. Hello, Paul. Hello, Mayor. How are you today?
Good. How are you, Bob?
Hanging in there.
Bob, you know
I
what?
wanted to ask you.
Are you getting that feedback, Mayor Harp?
I'm not getting it, no.
Okay. Yeah. Hey, Harry,
Can you hear
there's
me?
feedback here. Yeah. Okay. What's your question for Mayor Harp, Bob?
Sure. It's about the meeting you had last week, Mayor. Your youth services department, the police department, and I think we talked about it a couple of weeks ago about the shootings in New Haven. Can you tell us what was discussed?
Well, one of the things that we have that is uniquely New Haven is something called Community Youth Stat, which was put together after a series of shootings and murders when I first became mayor. And so we had an emergency youth stat meeting because there had been, as we spoke about the last time we spoke, there had been a rash of shootings in our community, and we wanted to make sure that we could get the guns off the streets, that we could get the people who are doing the shooting in custody, and so we had a a youth stat meeting. Now, at the meeting, we had our high schools were present, the street outreach workers were present. The meeting started off with the chief, with Chief Campbell, with Chief Johnson, and then there was Mr. Jacobson, I believe his name
Carl
is.
Jacobson, the head
Yeah.
of the internal investigative services.
Right. And so they sort of laid out, there were people from juvenile probation and parole. And then there were various service providers who were around the table. And we spent a lot of time talking about people of interest, about where they were with picking up guns and bringing people in, and then any intelligence that either folks from New Haven Public Schools, street outreach workers, police, the folks who are the not-for-profit providers that work with this population, our probation and parole, and we came up with a plan to get those that had were already not in custody, and to get the rest of the guns off of the street. So it was really a collaboration of all of these folks who are out in the community working together and coming up with a plan to reduce violence in our city.
Bob, did you have other questions?
Yeah, I did.
Thanks for that answer.
I don't know if you can discuss this, Mayor, but are we close to making any arrest in these 5 recent shootings?
We'd already made arrests, believe it or not. There were already arrests made.
And they weren't released. They didn't.
Well, because some of them were underage.
But they often say we arrested an unnamed.
Well, from what I gather, and maybe I shouldn't have even said this, but yes, there were some arrests.
No,
made.
I think it's fine for you to say it. I think maybe what they sometimes do is they wait to release more information until they get everybody they're looking for, so that certain information doesn't get out. I think that's
that. I think one of the things
so
that
I think
was
there's any problem you said that, but they don't want to say more.
They told us to be very careful about how we speak about this because some of the information was sensitive. And, and it was my understanding that, yes, there are some people in custody. They needed to get some more.
And my understanding, Bob, is that this is what you see flare up from time to time, and tell me if I'm wrong about this, that there are 2 groups that were beefing, 2 groups of young people beefing. Not sure what it was about, if it was, over romantic stuff or turf or whatever.
Yeah.
We have this phenomenon where violence is down to historically low levels in New Haven. But every time, there's going to be some shootings until we get rid of guns. And at times, beefs flare up. Some group gets out of jail. Someone's competing over turf. Remarkably, over the last bunch of years, I think it has more and more to do with Facebook. But in any case, it's hard to keep it in perspective. So I know we always try to make these decisions, Bob, how much we play it up. So at the Independent, we tend not to, we report because shootings matter, but we don't really play up that there were more than the average of last year, just in the first month this year, because that stuff is so variable. Like I understand that even if half those shootings, some of them were just random, somebody knew each other. But on the other hand, you got to keep an eye on it, and you guys were looking not to have it spread.
And, even with that, and there are more shootings than last year, but not more murders. So.
Also, but also more shootings than last year doesn't mean anything in 1 month.
Yeah.
Because you can't even look like 4 months to 4 months, because that's the danger with these statistics. We can look at a long-term trend. We have the lowest level of shootings we've had since either of us has been in New Haven over 40 years.
Mm-hmm.
That's a trend.
Right.
In any one given year, there was a year we had 4 people shot up at one place. We had a place, I think that same year, there was a dispute among a family in a dry cleaners or, a laundry in the Hill. That had nothing to do with street violence or dangers in town, but 3 people were killed, and makes your numbers look, skewed. So it's not that we should ignore violence, but I always worry about the tendency to overreact to very short-term blips in one direction or the other.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm glad you see it that way, because in many respects, that's the way that we see it. We still, when we compare ourselves to the other large cities in the state, we're doing extraordinarily well.
And violence is down. I mean, we want it to go more down, and you got to do things like have youth stats, so that what you were really doing, I think, what was important last week, and tell me if I'm wrong, is that people in a room who, these people were 19, 20, 18, they're connected with people in schools who are in trouble. And
Mhm.
people who work with them are sharing information about what they know about these, as they call them, persons of interest, sanitized
Absolutely.
term. And it's very important not to say that publicly. So you have that tricky thing of involving the whole community, but not letting out information.
No, it's really important. But on the other hand, like we're really very close, and we had already made some progress, as I understood it.
So I was thinking last week, I was just walking home, I was walking at night, like around Kensington Street last Friday night, I think it was. And I was just thinking, it feels so different to walk in New Haven than it used to. Like, I never am concerned walking alone at night on streets where there used to be like murders all the time. It's just, I don't know. It is a different city, and it's sometimes hard to remember that when there's
Just had
upsetting.
one more question.
Yeah, Bob.
My question is regarding the city of Stanford, Mayor, and
Stanford.
I don't know if you heard about.
That's even
what they
farther
were
away than
doing.
Branchford.
They've announced a new smart parking violation device
Oh,
that
okay.
unlocks immediately after payment. Do we have something like this, or would you look into something like
No, we'll
Hey,
certainly
Bob,
look
thanks for
into
that
it.
picture, man.
Yeah.
I mean, that question.
A very good one. We'll look into it. And something of interest, we're working with Mayor Martin and the mayors along the I-95 corridor to determine whether or not we can form an organization so that we can do joint planning. Um, certainly transportation planning, but also economic development planning to some extent. But transportation in terms of highway as well as rail, we have a lot more in common along that corridor than we often do with some of the other groups that we're partnered with.
All right. And Jason Bartlett, your head of youth development, ran that meeting, and I'm weeks behind on this one. There was an article written in the New Haven Register on the opinions section by Boise Kimber, who's a reverend in town, who's active in politics, and worked a lot with Jason on school stuff. He wrote a column urging you to fire Jason.
I know.
I couldn't even follow. What was that? I can't even follow this without a scorecard. Was there anything to that? Did that have any effect on what you're doing? Are you firing him?
No.
What was that about? I mean, I think I noticed he was still there running the meeting, and then I noticed his old article. I mean, this reminded me of the days when Earl Williams, used to write opinion articles in the Register when he'd have a fight with John Dow or something, and everyone kind of wondered, like, what are they really mad about?
Yeah, I don't really know what they're angry about. But at any rate, I'm sure they'll work it out.
In New Haven, you always need to update a scorecard. It's a good thing we have computers now. Scorecards, you used to have to write them down.
Right.
You never know who's on whose team each day.
No, that's true. That is true.
All right, we also want to give a shout out to Gregory Dash. The police department now, as of last week, has equipped and trained every police officer with a tourniquet.
Mm-hmm.
New Haven Hospital came up with $50,000. The idea was that even though firefighters and ambulance services usually use those to save a life, sometimes they can't get there fast enough. The way they found that out was when there was that barricaded man shooting on Elm Street a year and a half ago, where an officer got shot, and because it was, I guess I forget the word for hot zone, but you couldn't bring emergency workers in yet. If that officer had been bleeding too fast, he would have died.
Right.
Sometimes you bleed so fast in the scene, there's not time. So as they were doing the last day of training, one of the officers who had already been trained, Gregory Dash, turned out was an Army medic. Had before he was a cop, he went to a porch on Shelton Avenue where there had been 2 people shot, and one of them was bleeding very fast, bright red. He was going to die before they got there, and he used the tourniquet to save his life.
Isn't that amazing?
He was cop of the week last week, which means he'll probably be stolen by a suburban police department in the next month. But so he told me he was, he said that's why I became an officer, and it really showed immediately what a great partnership this was at New Haven Hospital and the cops to do this. He said, that's why I become a cop to save life. And he had been 7 years in the military, and he never once had to use any of that training for how to save a life.
Wow. Well, isn't it amazing? And we're grateful to Yale New Haven Hospital for that.
Yeah. And so I thought that was one of those things that happened under the radar, but really make a difference. New Haven Promise. They put the scholarships out for everyone who does, keeps a good average in school, lives in New Haven, gets pay a big chunk of their bill for going to college.
Right.
You were at a board meeting that last week?
Sure.
What's going on with that?
Well, we have quarterly board meetings, and it's doing really, really well. I think Yale provides the dollars for the scholarship. They will provide up to $4 million. And this year they're spending about $3.4 million on scholarships for New Haven kids. and the largest number of the young people in New Haven go either to UConn or to Southern, and then some will go to some of the independent schools. They get lesser for those as long as they're in state. All in-state schools qualify, and as long as they meet the standard, they can ultimately get a scholarship. The other thing that they do that I think is really interesting is that they call it to, through, and back. So their and back portion is that they work very hard with local employers, mostly Yale, but they also work with us, the city, and other employers to make sure that in the summer when the kids come back, that they have a job in New Haven.
I've been to those fairs. They have
Yeah.
one at the Yale Art Gallery where they get a lot of employers, the
Right.
hospital,
Mhm.
the police, and they meet the kids who New Haven kids getting scholarships to college, and they get good internships that gets them on a career path.
No, it really is important so that they don't just think about them going to school. And even the kids who are promised scholars who don't qualify for the scholarship because they go to school out of state, they're eligible in the summertime for these jobs. So it's really a program that really has built upon a whole model of bringing kids back to work here as adults, and it ultimately builds our community and builds the middle class in our community. And so it's a really great program. The other program, and I think you had someone there, is the Gateway to Education program, which they brought to New Haven Public Schools.
And that's getting kids who might need a different kind of experience to succeed in high school to
That's
go
right.
start taking Gateway Community College courses early, have that Calcutta College,
Right.
get started on that. It's a great program.
It is a great program, and they've already graduated 3 young people.
Right.
So.
I think Patricia Melton, who runs Promise, is a real kind of under the radar hero in New Haven.
No, she
I'm
really
really
is.
glad she
Yeah.
came back here.
Yeah, it's amazing.
And I'm glad you're listening to Dateline New Haven, Mayor Monday, 103.5 FM, live streamed at newhavenindependent.org. Drones. So you never know what you're going to get, what you're going to hear when you go to a management team meeting. You went to 2 on the east side last week,
Mm-hmm.
and they were crashed by 2 people who are either running for mayor or say they're going to, who don't live in that neighborhood.
Right.
They're pretty tough on you. But an idea came out of it. Like, so what do you do about dirt bikes? Which is a really tough challenge. What do you do
It
about
is
dirt
a
bikes?
tough challenge.
And somebody said, and Christian Bruckhart, who's this great beat guy, really smart guy, he's a promoted detective, and he has a business, that party bike thing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So he's been saying in the independent comments section with these research posts for a year, what about drones? Because everyone's saying we don't want to chase the dirt bikers. That's really dangerous for bystanders, really dangerous for cops. But you also don't want to let them. They really create havoc and endanger people.
They do.
They come from around the state. We've done different offensives over the years that we've publicized where we kind of look at social media and have people out trying to catch them. But they're saying, what about drones? You kind of get the picture of the person and get them.
Well, and I think that that's something that we'll look into. But at that very meeting where someone brought drones up, then there were others that said, "Oh no, that's a privacy issue."
That was my follow-up question. That's for real.
I know.
I mean, drones, a lot of what's going to make us safer with law enforcement, it started with stuff like ShotSpotter, is technology can help.
Yeah.
But the extreme of technology is China, where your every move is watched for many reasons. And you have no freedom. And the same people in one breath who are going to pressure you and other public officials to use that technology to stop the dirt bike because it's terrorizing. And there was some that went right up to someone with an 8-year-old kid at the bus stop.
Mm-hmm.
And on the other hand, they don't want to be spied on by the police whom they don't trust. So how do we work our way out of that one?
Well, I think that the policies and procedures might be a way to do that if you narrow what it is that you use the drones for, and that you assure that you don't use it to violate anyone's privacy, that you're not going through the neighbor's windows and looking. That happened in Hollywood. They were very upset, and so their council had to enact an ordinance that sort of defined what was appropriate and not appropriate for zones.
So try to use technology to make us safer, but make sure that we have some kind of policies that keep them in check.
Right. Exactly.
All right. So have you followed any of this about the new head of economic development for the state?
Just very.
This is not an innocent question. This is like a tough question.
Very peripherally, yeah.
Because there's a guy named he comes from Goldman Sachs.
Right.
who's David Lehman, who's going to be charged now of building up our cities.
Mm-hmm.
And he had a role at Goldman Sachs, which is pretty, okay, this is editorializing, pretty much as evil as any bank person had in causing the Great Recession. He and one other people were in the room creating a way to cheat all their customers and make money out of preying on people with bad mortgages. They bought up all these bad mortgages, and then they advised their own clients, buy these up, these are good investment. Then they made their own short sales, betting against those investments. And then when the whole thing collapsed, the economy, but the company got richer, they called him before Congress, and they said, well, where did you get this advice that they should invest in these? And he told them it was a good investment. He said, we heard it on the street. And it turned out there was no street. They called themselves the street.
Oh,
So obviously the question is, how do we feel about him becoming our guy in charge of building up the cities?
Well, you know, I'd certainly need to learn a little bit more about him, but I think whenever you hear the attachment to Goldman Sachs, that you get a little nervous.
Yeah.
So,
That's why I don't get nervous if it's not someone who didn't personally engineer the kind of stuff that they should be in jail for.
well, that's a very strong comment.
Yeah. I'm not expecting you to do that.
I
one.
wonder how you feel about it, Paul.
You know how I feel
I'm just
about it?
curious.
I feel that in governments, in politics, sometimes the divide is not between Democrat and Republican and conservative and liberal, but against big money and elite government versus public good and democratic grassroots economics. So I think there's like a Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren versus the Goldman Sachs
No,
that cuts across party.
I think I think that's
But on
an
safer ground-
interesting observation
Great safer ground for you is
that we should take into consideration.
speaking of the presidential race, did anything happen last couple of days that made you think about a house party you went to a year and a half ago in New Haven?
I can't think of anything.
Who's running
Paul.
for president?
Oh yes. What's her
Anyone
name?
you might have
From,
met
yes,
from
um,
Minnesota
yes, I did meet
who
her.
went to Yale, class of 1982.
Yes,
We were in
yeah.
the same residential college, but we weren't friends because
What's
she
her
was
name?
normal and I wasn't.
Yes, Klobuchar or
Amy Klobuchar.
yeah. I did think about that, and then I noticed in the Yale Daily News that there are possibly two from Yale. I guess the sort of outsider who's self-funding young man. I didn't.
Oh, one of the million.
Yeah,
Yeah. So Klobuchar announced that you had been at a house party in East Rock.
that's right.
She was at the home of Charlie Pillsbury,
That's right.
who also hails from Minnesota. I'm guessing that has to be the connection.
Okay.
What did you think of her?
I was impressed with her.
I am too.
She's very, very articulate, very compassionate. I was really impressed.
So the way they're billing her is she's from the Midwest. She can get along with all sides, but she's tough as a woman,
Mm-hmm.
and that maybe she's the one because she wins in districts that go heavy for Trump.
That's right. That was the other thing that I noticed in the paper and that the Republican senators in Washington really like her. They
Yeah.
like working with her.
Yeah, but says she is a real Democrat. And there was
Mhm.
a column today in the Times by David Leonhardt, another Yale graduate, who said that when people talk about wanting a center candidate, they have this myth that the center in American politics means socially liberal, fiscally conservative. And I always thought that's what the center was too.
Mm-hmm.
But they did polling and found out it's about 3 people, but all 3 of them write all the articles in newspapers and are kind of wealthy. And that when you do polling, the center of the country is quite liberal in economics.
Mm.
And that he thinks center is more of an image and a feeling than a scientific term. So that if Amy Klobuchar is someone who's for Medicare for all or something like it, and for higher taxes on the wealthy, and for criminal justice reform, but is from the Midwest and has like a Midwest style and gets along with everybody and doesn't like grandstand and, be nasty and call herself a socialist, that kind of stands as what centrism is.
That's an interesting point.
I don't know.
So we can have our cake and eat it too.
Now, what if Stacey Abrams? So last week in New Haven, there was a watch party at State of the Union for Stacey Abrams, gubernatorial candidate. Should have been the governor of Georgia, but they stole it from her. She gave the Democratic response. What about if she runs for president? She's going to be deciding. What do you think of that?
I think it would be great. I think because the process is so long, it gives people a chance to sort of try to run, see if they can get enough support, raise enough money, and if they can, they move forward, and if they can't, they don't. And it gives the country an opportunity, I think, to reflect on what they want, what we want our leaders to be in the future, the kind of
So a
people.
weeding out process.
It's kind of a weeding out process, but it also it creates opportunity, I think, also for people who wouldn't normally have opportunity to get their voices heard.
And you're hearing that on Mayor Monday at WNHS 103.5 FM, live streamed at newhavenindependent.org. What about opportunity homeless people? There was a hearing last week for a homeless bill of rights. There's a proposal that special rules in place for how police will deal with homeless people. And activists say it's really important that we codify this. The police testified that this is actually going to be not good for the homeless, because right now they believe there's not a problem. They take a lot of extra steps to help homeless people, and that when you tie people's hands with these kind of rules that don't anticipate unexpected situations, that there's really not a need from it, and it makes the rules too strict. Any thoughts on this?
Well, honestly, I think that our police department, if you reflect on it, is probably one of the most compassionate, probably in the state. That as a city, we open our arms to the homeless. Oftentimes, I think people who you think are homeless, sometimes they're not, just because they look a certain
Including
way.
a lot of people panhandle.
Yeah, exactly.
They're not rich. I mean, they're not living like in nice places, but
they have a roof over their heads. They're not living in a shelter, and they're not living, like in the woods somewhere. And so, I think it gets to be really hard. I think what the police department is supposed to do is to assure that people are abiding by the law and not breaking the law. And so, what you really need to worry about is whether or not having this special set of circumstances would interfere with their main responsibility.
What police were most recently doing was, if the most recent freeze, they are at night making sure that homeless people were at warming centers and not freezing to death.
They do. They go and they make sure that the people that are in these encampments, they help bring them in. They warm them up if they can't find a place right away. In our district stations that we have, our police are very compassionate, and I think it also presupposes that people that you might think are homeless, because again, nobody goes around with a little tag that says I am homeless, and so I think that you're really putting a lot of pressure on our police department to not really, if a person looks a certain way, then they may turn an eye if they're doing something that's inappropriate.
Okay. There were some rumors on the street about staffing changes, which I have no idea if they're true, but have you thought about who's going to be doing economic development? You said that was going to be for a year on an acting basis. Was
Mike Piscatella.
So is that's in?
That's still, he's doing that.
So he'll be doing that through 2019. So that other rumor I heard was completely wrong. And
what did you
they
hear?
heard Clay Williams. Someone wrote me in this week.
Oh, that's interesting.
Is he getting promoted to anything? Or?
Not that I know of.
Okay, so the other one was about who might replace Will Clark as the finance person on the Board of Ed. Any thoughts on that? Any decisions on that coming up? Or?
Yeah, there might be, yeah.
Any Mike Pinto?
Where do you hear these things?
I don't know. Was that way off?
No.
It's not way off.
No, it isn't.
Okay. Well, 1 for 2 they hear on the street. It really was like the Goldman Sachs guy. It really was the street. Tax prep. So we're getting tax season's going to begin. And one crusade we often have in our city is to make sure that people who don't earn a lot of money know they can get refunds. And they might, the catch-22 is, the money to get the tax preparation to get the refunds.
Right.
So what have you been up to about that?
So we have a VITA program, which is operating in 14 places across the city. But you can go to 316 Dixwell Avenue and get help with tax preparation there. You can go to any of our libraries. And then there are other places throughout the city that you can go. I think you can go, I think it might be New Haven tax preparation, and you can find the VITA sites or New Haven VITA.
And you link up with churches, don't you? You get the word out to people?
Churches. We link up with community services organizations. So some of our healthcare centers, I believe, are sites, but there are 14 different places across the city. You can call our Community Services Administration to get a list.
VITA, VITA.
VITA.
Because, it's interesting to me that, I think it's starting the Clinton era. Tell me if I'm wrong. Where it was no longer possible for people who were advocating for the poor and the working poor to say, raise taxes on the wealthy. So the way there was assistance given to people who are working but having trouble made these were through tax cuts for people who won't make a lot, the earned income tax credit.
Right.
So Bill Clinton pushed that nationally, and then in this state we went really further. I don't know. You don't think you pay taxes under $50K a year, do you?
No,
In
well,
Connecticut?
it's really pretty high. I think it might be between $40,000 and
Yeah, which is great.
$50,000, and so we have an unearned income tax credit, so that which basically, okay, it's if I understand it correctly, you wouldn't have to apply for, you wouldn't have to necessarily submit your forms to the state of Connecticut. But if you do, and you qualify for this, you could get a tax return for dollars that you actually didn't pay in taxes.
Mhm.
So, and if you can get the state taxes done at VITA as well as the federal taxes. My understanding is that you can get anywhere from a couple of $1,000s up to, depending upon how large your family is, to $10,000 on the federal side. So,
And you can also get a payday loan and get totally ripped off because as of last week, the Trump administration's takeover of the Consumer Financial Protection Review Board, they've decided now it's legal again for companies to prey on people for payday loans they know they can't pay back so they can get them in hock.
well, that's not good.
State Attorney General William Tong came out swinging on that one last week, talking about how the average person, more than half the people get the loan, end up having to take a second loan to pay back the first loan, pay many more times what they borrowed.
It's really tough to be poor in America, isn't it? Especially when you have a president like that.
Well, predatory capitalism has really been unleashed.
Yeah.
Kind of brings you back to that other point.
And the other thing about the VITA tax work is that it's free. If you, depending, well, it's free. If you're eligible, it's free. The people have been trained by the IRS. They know everything to look for. And you know, frankly, at a certain level, because I thought you were going to talk about the pay for tax preparation for a lot of times people who are poor go there, but you might as well go to VITA. It's free.
Yeah, it's free.
Yeah,
And you got
and
volunteers.
they know what they're doing,
And
and
we
they'll make
built
sure
that
you
up.
get everything.
I remember
Oh,
the
and the other thing that I thought you were going to talk about is the savings program that the United Way is going to
Tell me
run
about
with
that.
people. Well, you're going to have to contact United Way to be precise. But if people, once they get their return, their tax return, will set up a savings account, then for up to a certain amount per month, United Way will also put in $10 a month.
Oh, so they're going to match it. So they're trying to
gonna do a
encourage
match, yeah.
people to save. That's a
Yes.
great thing.
That is a great
So
thing.
contact United Way on that. You save some money, they help you do it.
Yeah.
Okay, Aaron Good has a question. Ready?
Okay, Aaron.
You sure you're ready? You want take a little
Yeah, he
break
always
first?
has a
Okay.
really good one too.
He
Let me
does.
take a breath.
Okay, Aaron Good, thank you for writing in with a question. Mayor Harp. Does Mayor Harp support proposed legislation? This is one of those issues I know are so important I never understand. I just got to admit this, okay? I know who are the good guys and the bad guys. I just don't understand the. Does Mayor Harp support proposed legislation to get rid of the third-party electrical supplier aggregators in Connecticut that came into the market in the 1990s deregulation? Or would she support allowing municipalities to become energy suppliers? A reform known as community choice aggregation used widely in Massachusetts and California to save consumers money and increase the market for renewables.
Well, you know, I think Wallingford has its own.
They have municipal-owned electricity. It's interesting. It's
And-
not a liberal town, and they've had it for decades, and they pay less for electricity.
They do.
Because
And
they don't have
so-
this private for-profit energy giant on it.
So if there was a way to really assure that we would pay less, it would be nice to have a way for our city to provide that service to our residents. But you know, I know that the current system that just didn't work. There wasn't enough competition in it, and I believe that our I believe it's Miss Katz who works
Department
for
of Consumer Protection.
Consumer Protection is recommending that we come out of that program. I mean, think about it. Most people don't use those programs, and you get sometimes even a lower amount from the traditional.
Mm-hmm. So we just put
providers.
solar on our roof as of last week.
Mm-hmm.
And then and you have to wait for UI to come say, "Oh, it's okay," and then you have to go into their grid, and they kind of slow walk the process. And I always thought that was kind of outrageous. And they also have a credit that's disappearing, but we were grandfathered because we got our application in a time where you can kind of
Oh, that's
pay
good.
less. Yeah,
I'm impressed because it's not an easy system. My understanding is
Yeah.
that.
But I still worry about if the apocalypse comes, you still have to go into their grid and come back. I would think someone should make money on being ready once the apocalypse comes, and like the Russians would, get our grid down, where people can come and rejigger it so you can get your energy directly from your roof.
That I bet you somebody will have that business
Yeah.
soon, Paul.
And thank you as always, Aaron Good. And just so we don't have a few more minutes left here, Transit Equity Day. So we
Mhm.
marked Rosa Parks' birthday in New Haven. We're
Right.
talking about buses. And, from your first day as mayor, you talked about good bus service as a civil rights issue. Made a lot of progress with state stuff on the mayors and the city's issues, like the Q House under Malloy. We didn't make a lot of progress on bus service. What were you up to with Transit Equity Day, and what were the issues you saw with the buses?
Well, I think it was important just to bring attention to how important bus travel is to the people who live in New Haven. 30% of the people who live in New Haven don't drive cars. They take the bus. They sometimes ride their bicycle and take the bus. Someone did a demonstration about how easy it was to actually attach your bike to the bus. And so that was really important. I think the bus drivers pointed out a problem that I didn't know existed, which was,
Going to the bathroom.
yeah.
Because I've
To
been,
put it
I ride the bus. I feel
Yes,
so
that.
bad. I ride the bus, and, sometimes a few
Yeah.
times a week. I've been talking. Bus drivers are really nice.
They are.
And there's one woman I felt so bad for. It was a cold night, and she said, "There's really no place I can stop right now to go to the bathroom, and I'm very, very uncomfortable."
And I really think that we should, particularly in downtown, in the town green district, and then maybe up in just in our major arterials, try to identify places where that can happen, because that's kind of outrageous if you
Yeah,
think
they get
about it.
some help where they have give them advice of where to go, but they want to be able to contact where they arrange their places, and you definitely can go there.
And
stop
you don't
and
have a
just-
problem, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
No.
LCI has a problem sometimes. That's your anti-blight agency that tries to keep neighborhoods in good shape.
Mhm.
And they're trying to keep a step ahead of these large landlord groups that are really slumlord groups that get rundown housing out of foreclosure before anyone else knows the houses are available. They pay cash, and they get Section 8 money from the federal government, rents, but they don't put that into keeping up the place.
Mhm.
And I know LCI has been working on that a lot. And one thing they're trying to do is to try to be able to get property faster when it comes up
Right.
to foreclosure. So they got one that Marquise Ricks was covering one of their meetings last week, where they found out that they were able to get a house from Wells Fargo before it went to the slumlords. But then one thing your director of LCI, Serena Sinjura, is working on is to make it a faster approval process, because you have all these boards you got to go through when you're going to buy a single piece of property in New Haven. And, first the LCI board, I think sometimes city plans, sometimes not, I'm not sure. Board of Alders has a committee hearing, then a board of owners vote. It could be 5 months.
Mhm.
These groups come in, they tell the people selling the house, today I will give you cash for this whole
Right.
house, because they have investors from abroad. Any thoughts on this? How we're going to see with that trend?
Well, no, I think it's really important that we have a way to fast track this process, because, in fact, if we don't, we leave our neighborhoods vulnerable to these people that we know are not going to take care of the neighborhoods and the property. And so we've got to do something about this very sort of weighted
I was at the
process.
hearing when Serena made that pitch to Alders to make the process faster. And it really struck me how, because, she spent 40 years in community development, different
Mhm.
places. She really understood kind of how it works
Right.
and like what it's going to take mechanically to take a step ahead of that.
And I know there might be some way, if the board is concerned about, there might be some way if we can just pick up the property early to go then back through a process, because
That's a great idea.
we've just got to
And
find
if you're
a
not
way.
happy with it, then find someone other than a bad landlord to take it.
Absolutely.
All right. So do you ever look at Hamden and think you're watching a rerun from the 90s in New Haven?
Give me a for instance. But
Like,
I mean,
for instance, they're dealing with racial issues in the schools and
they've
things
always been dealing with that.
That's true. Well, they just last week they had for the first time people there called for a civilian review board,
Oh my goodness.
because there was
yeah.
a police officer caught on video who stopped someone who didn't speak English. First
Mhm.
yelled at him, "I'm gonna get hurt and arrested if you don't stop pretending you don't speak English," and then threatened to report him to ICE, Immigration Customs Enforcement. had no idea if he's an immigrant or not. And the police said, the city said, we're going to investigate this. This is what we want. We want community-style policing. And some of the city council people said, let's have a civilian board.
No, well, that does sound like it looks like the 90s in New Haven. And, honestly, they need to look at the way in which we train our police. We could be very helpful. They don't have to actually take ours after they've been here for a couple of years. we can help them with the training because this is really just an issue of training people and making sure when you do hire police that there's some sensitivity that obviously needs to be there.
All right. Thanks so much today, Mayor Harper. Love starting the week together.
All right, great. It's good seeing you.
Thanks, everyone, for tuning in. Thanks, Aaron Good, for channeling us as usual. Thanks to Gateway Community College and Bertram Moses PC for providing financial support for today's program. We're going to take it out with the Afro-Semitic Experience performing I Wish I Knew How It Would Feel to Be Free from the group CD, A Plea for Peace. Now, we know what it's like to be free. Just got to remember to book our flight. Fly free with us all day and all night long here at WNHH, New Haven's home for community radio.